Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. This is Asad Yaqub and I welcome you to a wonderful video of mine. Very recently, one of my students, look what he got. Listening 9 band. Guys, 9 band means 39 to 40 correct answers. Reading 7.5 band. This is academic reading, where students hardly reach 6 and many are struggling with academic reading. And writing 6.5, and I advised him for EOR but he didn't go for that. Speaking 8.5, and luckily this student of mine is with me today, and in the next few moments you're going to listen to him. He's going to share his success story, how he reached this band score, what is his secret study plan, and all that. We are going to talk to him. So Assalamu alaikum Muhammad, how are you?
I'm fine, sir. How are you?
Alright, so Muhammad is here. I'm fine too, and he's achieved this great band. You can see his TRF as well. So Muhammad, I would like to ask you a number of different questions.
Yes, sure.
First of all, congratulations.
Thank you.
Mashallah, it's great band score that you have achieved. Wish you good luck with the next stuff as well, okay?
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. And guys, this video is going to motivate you to achieve your desired band as well. So Muhammad, let's start with listening.
Yes,
how
sir.
did you practice? What did you do? What was your secret recipe? And share your exam day experience and all that.
Well, for listening, I did a lot of practice, mainly from the Cambridge books. That helped me a lot. On my initial practice days, I usually scored 35, 36 correct, and soon I had realized that I was getting a few wrong answers in MCQs.
Okay.
Therefore, I focused much on MCQs, especially double MCQs, where I usually tend to miss one answer as soon as the audio was moving along. Therefore, what I had then planned was that I used to interpret the question briefly and used to understand the question effectively. Soon I went over the answers, and then I used to match the question with the correct answer, and in that way I could score better mark in MCQs as well.
Good.
As far as maps are concerned, in maps you generally need to learn about the map language. That is extremely important, and a few tips for listening additionally is that you need to learn how those Western people communicate, and a good way to do that is watching serials on Netflix, and it will help you greatly. In addition, you must know a few collocations, and collocations alone had helped me multiple times, and I could easily guess 3 to 4 answers before the audio was even being played.
Okay.
So that greatly
wow,
helped me
collocations.
as well. Yes, collocations.
All
For
right.
example, cultural diversity and stuff like that, you could easily guess that.
Good, good.
And for the exam day strategy, I would suggest that you need to be extremely patient. Don't take any stress, and don't listen to any other student nearby, because that could leave a negative effect on you as well.
Were you advised by any student nearby or anything like that?
No, definitely I was well prepared, so I tend to ignore any advice on that day.
Okay, so I would just like to ask you a few questions. Like, when your listening test started, did you have the idea that you would get 9 out of 9? And how did you start it, and how it went on, and how you found the answers?
As soon as I opened the listening question paper, I realized that the pattern was completely off. It was a very odd pattern, and that
Okay, what do you mean by odd pattern?
odd pattern means that the latest Cambridge books usually had one word only in section 1 and one word only in section 4. But in this, we had a completely opposite. There was one word only in section 1 and no more than 3 words in section 2, while section 3 and 4 had a mix of 3 type of questions. For example, matching, MCQs, fill in the blanks, etc. Therefore, this got me into some pressure early bit, but I tended to ignore that, and I went section on section. So first I had dealt with section 1 and I was confident that I had scored 10 out of 10. And then in section 2 as well, I was pretty confident that I had scored 10 out of 10. But then came section 3 and 4, where I got a bit nervous as I was a bit weak in MCQs. So I really rectified my solution over there and just followed that step to score really good marks in that. One surprising thing was that when I was on my question 39, I was sitting right in front of the stage, and all of a sudden all of the invigilators got up and they were heading towards the students, and I got really distracted and I had been looking at them. In that, I lost my grip on the question and I missed my answer over there. and I regretted that. As I soon recovered and found the last question answer, but then I spent the next 5 minutes after transferring my answers to try to guess that specific answer. One tip is that you don't leave anything blank. Just try to write something that is relevant to the question. Hopefully it could be correct as well.
All right, mashallah, that's fantastic. So yeah, I mean, exam invigilators can be a distraction sometimes.
Yes.
All right, now let's move on to reading module where you scored 7.5.
Yes.
Academic reading, students have time management issues. At times they can't complete in 60 minutes. So what was your strategy in how you scored 7.5 in academic reading?
That day I was a bit unlucky as my reading was a hard reading question paper. The main reason was that it contained around 28 to 30 questions that were not in order with the passage.
Okay, type B questions.
Type B questions, and that really consumed a lot of time, not only for me but the entire hall of the students were complaining that they have been facing some problem in this reading test. Even the invigilator, the next day I had my speaking, she also told that all of the students had complained that the reading was extremely difficult. The passage were a bit too long and they were extraordinarily long in comparison to a regular passage that we had done in practice. So as soon as I had realized that the test was difficult, I effectively divided the passages, the 3 passages, into 20 minutes, and I didn't want to spend more than 20 minutes on each passage. And what I planned at that moment was that I'm going to answer 40 out of 40 questions over there. I'm not going to miss on anything.
Good.
And I would generally just go skim through the passages and find the answers at my best. And that was a strategy that I had anticipated on the exam day, but a strategy that was done before was that I used to complete each passage in 15 minutes, because on the exam day you are more likely to double check the answers and you're more likely to waste more time. Therefore you need to practice in a much shorter time while you are practicing at home or in your coaching institution.
Okay, and how did you transfer the answers to the answer sheet? At the same time, at the end? So how did you transfer the answers?
At the same time, as soon as I found one answer to a specific question, I immediately transferred that to the answer sheet. And that was, you must never leave all the answers at the end, because you are most likely to mess things up over there and you can likely skip a few questions, as examiners are pretty strict. And one student mistakenly, after his writing time finished, had just wrote a word and the examiner was like, I'm really sorry, I need to cancel your result. And the student insisted a lot.
Okay, so they're this strict.
They're pretty strict and they were not helpful at all, and they showed no leniency as
well.
All
right, fantastic, very good. Now, what about writing? I'm sorry to see this, you got 6.5, but I'm quite sure if you go for EOR, inquiry on results, because your speaking band is 8.5, so writing band may improve, but I think your requirement is fulfilled by this result. So how was the writing test and how did you achieve? Even 6.5 is not bad band, it's really good one. So how did you achieve that and how did you practice? What was your style and all that?
Well, for writing, I would suggest that firstly you need to know the format in which you're going to write the answer. And you need to know the number of paragraphs that each essay type requires and the arguments you need to make. You need to learn that you need to show a mixture of complex, conditional and
compound sentences,
which is very important. The reason why I got a low score in writing was that I didn't practice writing at all. I only practiced each essay one time, and that was when I was in Sir's mock test, and apart from that I did no writing practice at all. So I guess it's me to be blamed at the end of the day, but if I could try harder, I would definitely have scored a good band score. And the strategy that I would suggest for writing is practice. Practice makes you perfect, and writing is something that you need to practice. Once you write down a piece of essay, you could type it on Grammarly, and that would efficiently show your grammar mistakes over there. And you could use that tool, which is free of cost to.
Alright, so you used free version of Grammarly?
Yes, free version.
Good. So you can use free version of Grammarly and type and you can find your mistakes.
You could find your mistakes, and it punctuation mistakes, grammar mistakes and any mistake in the sentence, that is immediately notified, and you could easily cope up with your mistakes, which are mostly repetitive.
Okay, this is fantastic. Thank you. So what about speaking? I mean, you got 8.5 in speaking, and we know that examiners, they hardly give 7, 7.5, but you achieved 8.5. So first thing is, like, how was your interaction with the examiner, and what sort of questions did they ask you in part 1, part 2, part 3, and how was your overall experience?
Well, the examiner was extremely friendly, and I would suggest to all students out there that once the examiner greets you with a good smile, you should too greet her with a great smile and be really helpful and cooperative with her, because at the end of the day she's gonna mark you. You are not gonna do anything to her. So if you're a bit rude, arrogant, this can mess up your band score on that specific day as well. Be extremely kind and always answer questions specifically. So for speaking, in part 1 there were around 10 to 12 questions. First of all, there is a common question that all students are asked, that is, do you study or do you do a job? And at this point there are 4 follow-up questions for job and study specifically that almost all students are being asked. So these questions should be prepared well in advance, and you could give a first impression that could even last long, and it would eventually help you, as your first impression creates a very good point about how competent you are in English speaking. And if you make a couple of mistakes, they are most likely to be ignored by the examiner, and she would favor you in that.
Okay.
So after that, I was asked about watches, and you could even crank up a couple of jokes. Like I told her that your stupid examiner down just removed my wristwatch, and she was just laughing at that moment. Make sure that you use a lot of idioms as well. Idioms are really important. Some easy idioms are like piece of a cake, which means easy; finding a needle in a haystack, which means finding something that is very rare. Or using idioms could really improve your band score as well.
And what about your speaking part 2 cue card? What was the topic, and did examiner give you full time to speak, or were you interrupted by the examiner?
Well, the go-to goal that Sir Asad taught us, that you need to speak until the examiner interrupts you, and I followed that path, and I spoke for around 2 minutes. After that, the examiner had interrupted me. The topic that I got in speaking part 2 was describe a famous personality in your country who you admire. And I had talked about Imran Khan, and it was pretty easy, and I had practiced this cue card a couple of times at my house as well. And there are cue cards that match this sort of question, around 4 or 5, with little differences, and you could easily practice this much in your home as well.
And what about speaking part 3? How was your experience? How many questions did they ask?
Well, surprisingly, as part 1 and part 2 had gone, I had left a really good impression on the examiner, and when it came to part 3, she just asked me 2 questions, and that too I didn't answer that great, or I didn't answer them for a good period of time, and she didn't bother to ask me the 3rd question, and she was kind enough to tell that the test has ended. Part 3 questions are usually a follow-up questions on part 2, but if the examiner usually faces difficulty in assessing your band score, she could ask around 8 to 10 part 3 questions as well, and they are pretty much demanding, as I believe you need to answer them in much detail. Therefore, my go-to tip is that you need to create a good impression in part 1 and part 2, so your part 3 could be relieved by the examiner to some extent as well.
Alright, so Mohammed, with 8 band score, now what do you plan to do?
Well, I definitely plan to apply to a foreign university, most probably in Canada or Australia, and my 8 band score will definitely help me with the process, and it is more than what I require.
Alright, so I would like to ask you one more question about your timetable, about your study routine. So when you are practicing IELTS, what sort of timetable you had? Like, did you take 1 listening test, 1 reading test every day, or what was the practice actually?
At the initial days, I used to take 1 listening and 1 reading test, but as soon as I realized that I'm good at listening, I dropped a listening test to twice in a week only. And I focused on reading, as I was facing a variable score in reading. At some times I could score 39, 40, but at some tests that were difficult, my score could fall till 30 as well. Therefore, I spend more time on reading, specifically on MCQs questions in reading, and list of researchers, list of heading questions, which are a bit difficult to go on. And all type 2 questions in reading require sufficient practice in order you could achieve them effectively. Another thing is that you need to regularly follow time when you're practicing reading. So don't take things for granted and take 10-20 minutes extra at the end of the day in the exam day. It would affect you seriously. Try to finish your reading test a couple of minutes before 1 hour. So on the reading test day, even with the exam pressure, you're likely to finish the whole test in 40 minutes.
Okay, so would you like to give any overall advice to my IELTS candidates? Like you want to say anything to them?
First of all, my advice is that sir videos are really helpful and his classes too are really helpful. So you should definitely watch those videos or take a class whenever you have a chance. They would really help you understand the tips and tricks of IELTS, which are really important to score a good band score. Apart from that, your English level should be of a great level as well in order to achieve a good band score. And you need to know how do the Western people communicate, how do they write things, etc. So best ways are that you could read novels, you could read editorials in newspaper. They are usually difficult and written by scholars, and you could learn quite few words. In addition, I would suggest watching Netflix. It is really helpful as you could understand.
So thank you very much, Mohammed. I truly wish you best of luck. And guys, you know, Mohammed is a very good example. He started practicing IELTS from scratch,
Yes,
and then
definitely.
gradually he went on and on and on, and finally he achieved 8 band, right? So Mohammed, thank you very much.
Thank
All
you
the
very much,
best.
sir. Thank you.
Well guys, Mohammed is a very good example, and he achieved his desired band score. He worked hard, and actually he achieved more than his desired band score, because he wants to go to Canada, and even for Canada 6 each is fine, but he got 8 band overall. So I mean, whenever you are sick of IELTS, whenever you feel down, you feel low, you find yourself in disappointment and all that, I think you need to think about Mohammed, how he achieved his desired band score. All the best guys. Thank you very much. I look forward to interviewing you next when you achieve your desired band. So you're going to be like Mohammed, who is with me now. So you can be the next with me, and I'll be interviewing you. All the best. I also teach IELTS online all over the world and on campus here in Lahore. If you want to be the part of my online or on campus IELTS classes, my WhatsApp number is given. You can contact me for that. Asad Yaqub truly wishes you best of luck. Take care. Allah Hafiz.